Evelyn Lancaster settled into her plush seat in the first-class cabin of Skyline Air Flight 807, calmly preparing for a routine trip that she often made without fanfare. Her appearance was unassuming, a neatly pressed blouse, comfortable slacks, and a simple pair of flat shoes. Few would guess she was actually the majority owner of the entire airline, a detail she preferred to keep quiet, allowing her to experience each journey much like any other traveler. Across the aisle, flight attendant Brooke Simmons whisked around with polished efficiency, greeting the other first-class passengers, handing out warm towels, and ensuring each person had stowed their carry-ons correctly. At first glance, Brooke appeared every bit the model employee. Her uniform was immaculate, her hair neatly pinned into a stylish twist, and she maintained a professional smile. Yet there was a noticeable difference in her behavior toward Evelyn. While Brooke lavished attention on other passengers, offering them complimentary beverages and small amenities, she barely acknowledged Evelyn's presence. Evelyn didn't mind being left alone. She enjoyed the quiet moments before takeoff, often using that time to read over documents or send a few emails. However, her peaceful observation soon shifted to mild concern. She noticed that Brooke was quite selective in where she directed her courtesy. Individuals who exuded wealth, or boasted about their frequent flyer status, received immediate offers of pre-departure beverages, while Evelyn's humble demeanor seemed to register as unimportant to Brooke. This imbalance in treatment didn't upset Evelyn, she had encountered it before. Over the years, she'd quietly observed how certain crew members behaved when they believed no one of importance was watching. Occasionally, these insights helped her shape company policies regarding customer service and employee training. While Skyline Air prided itself on thorough instruction for staff, there were always a few employees who slipped through the cracks. As passengers continued to board, Brooke remained enthusiastic in her interactions with the other premium travelers. She made eye contact with them, inquired about their comfort, and ensured their seats were perfect. Yet she gave Evelyn hardly a second glance, just a cursory nod when Evelyn first sat down. Evelyn, maintaining her calm and collected nature, decided to watch the scenario unfold before intervening. If there was one thing she had learned over the years, it was that genuine character often revealed itself in small, everyday actions. There would be ample opportunity later to address any lapse in service. After all, she wanted an authentic snapshot of how passengers in her airline's top-tier cabin were treated, regardless of name or status. As the final passengers found their seats, Brooke concluded her checks, then lingered at the front galley. Her posture was confident, she was clearly proud of her role. However, in her eagerness to cater only to those she deemed worthy, she had missed a fundamental responsibility: to serve everyone in her cabin with the same courtesy and respect. Unaware that the unassuming woman in seat 2A wielded incredible influence, Brooke was about to learn a lesson she would never forget. With the plane's doors secured and the safety demonstration underway, Evelyn Lancaster took a moment to glance around the first-class cabin. The overhead lights glowed softly, casting a warm sheen on the sleek leather seats. While other travelers settled in with magazines, tablets, and e-readers, Evelyn calmly watched flight attendant Brooke Simmons make her final rounds before departure. Brooke's polished veneer still shone, her crisp navy blue uniform and meticulously styled hair reflected an image of professionalism. Yet that professionalism seemed to falter whenever she interacted, or chose not to interact, with Evelyn. Shortly after takeoff, Skyline Air Flight 807 leveled off at cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign chimed off, and several passengers stretched or rose to retrieve items from the overhead bins. Evelyn leaned back in her seat, contemplating whether to speak up about the uneven service she had witnessed before takeoff. Ultimately, she decided to give Brooke another opportunity to do the right thing. A few minutes later, Brooke began offering refreshments to the first-class passengers. She started with the gentleman in seat 1A, who was boasting about his status as a Platinum Elite member. Brooke offered him a premium bottle of sparkling water, accompanied by a politely delivered explanation of how only top-tier travelers received this brand. Next, she moved on to the couple in seats 1C and 1D, cheerfully providing them with a selection of juices and soft drinks. Each time, Brooke inquired about their comfort, their meal preferences, and whether they needed anything special. When Brooke reached Evelyn's row, she paused. The gleam in her eye dimmed, and her friendly smile faded. Evelyn was expecting at least a courteous question about refreshments, even if it was half-hearted. Instead, Brooke flicked her gaze over Evelyn as if she were a minor inconvenience. She offered no beverage and merely asked, "Are you all right?" before turning away to check on the next passenger. Evelyn politely cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said in a gentle tone, "may I have a glass of water?" Room temperature would be fine, just a simple glass. Brooke hesitated, her expression taut. "We only serve premium bottled water here in first class," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of condescension. "We have limited supplies, and those are generally reserved for our upper-tier frequent flyers. If you'd like, I can note your request and see if any is left over once we finish service for our more established guests." Her words hung in the air, barbed with the implication that Evelyn didn't measure up. Evelyn offered a calm nod, though inside she felt a flicker of disappointment. As the owner of Skyline Air, she had helped craft the airline's ethos, comfort, courtesy, and inclusivity for every traveler. Watching one of her employees disregard the core values she held dear was both revealing and troubling. Undeterred, Evelyn decided to wait patiently. She understood that at times, employees might be under stress or misinterpret situations. But Brooke's dismissive attitude seemed entirely personal. Something about Evelyn's unassuming appearance must have led Brooke to believe she was not worth the same effort as the others. The flight continued without incident for another half-hour or so. Brooke passed by several times, continuing to serve snacks and drinks to other passengers. Each time, she ignored Evelyn's row. Meanwhile, a junior flight attendant named Hazel Parker, fresh-faced and clearly eager to do her job well, scurried back and forth, assisting Brooke. Whenever Hazel walked by Evelyn, she offered a polite smile but seemed hesitant to go against Brooke's seniority. Finally, Evelyn pressed her call button. She waited patiently until Brooke arrived. "I'm sorry to bother you again," Evelyn said, keeping her tone even, "but could I please have a glass of water now? It's been a while since the first service." Brooke's exasperation peeked through the facade. "Ma'am," she began, "we've already allocated our premium water bottles. If it's that important, you can always purchase one in the terminal after we land. There's a convenience store right by the arrival gate." She gave a dismissive shrug. "We have rules about who gets the complimentary amenities." Before Evelyn could respond, Brooke spun on her heel and attended to another row. The lack of professional courtesy stunned even a few other passengers nearby, who cast curious glances in Evelyn's direction. Still, Evelyn chose not to correct Brooke in front of everyone. She preferred to keep a level head, gather her thoughts, and address the matter privately when the time was right. A little while later, Hazel approached, carefully avoiding Brooke's scrutiny. With a quick glance over her shoulder to ensure she wasn't being watched, she slipped a small, chilled bottle of water onto Evelyn's tray table. "I'm sorry about all of this," Hazel whispered, her cheeks flushed. I didn't think it was right to ignore you. I know you asked politely." Evelyn smiled, genuinely touched. "Thank you, Hazel. I appreciate your kindness." Hazel's quiet generosity highlighted the contrast between the two flight attendants. While Brooke fixated on rank, status, and her own misguided assumptions, Hazel adhered to the fundamental principle of hospitality. She served passengers respectfully, regardless of outward appearances or perceived importance. However, it wasn't lost on Evelyn that Hazel was risking Brooke's ire. "I'll be careful," Hazel said softly, sensing Evelyn's concern. "It's just the right thing to do." With that, she retreated to the galley. As the flight wore on, Brooke occasionally noticed Hazel speaking with Evelyn, and a tense frown creased her face. Something about Evelyn was beginning to unnerve Brooke. She caught glimpses of Evelyn quietly tapping on her smartphone, sending a series of messages. The older flight attendant had no idea what Evelyn was typing, but she sensed there was more to this reserved passenger than met the eye. An unsettling mix of doubt and dread gnawed at her, prompting her to replay their earlier interactions in her mind. At one point, Evelyn stood up to stretch her legs, strolling calmly toward the rear of the first-class cabin. As she passed Brooke, she offered a polite smile, which Brooke reluctantly returned. Brooke's earlier confidence felt shaken. Her eyes darted toward Evelyn's phone, half hidden in Evelyn's hand, where a message remained open. The text displayed the Skyline Air logo, an emblem that should only appear on company communications. The sight of that familiar logo on a passenger's phone made Brooke's pulse quicken. She'd never seen a regular traveler with access to that particular platform, and she began to wonder if she had made a dire mistake in her treatment of this seemingly ordinary woman. Could Evelyn be someone high up in the company? A corporate executive, perhaps. Or even a stakeholder with direct influence over staffing decisions. By the time Evelyn returned to her seat, Brooke's composure had faltered. She hovered a few rows behind Evelyn, silently debating how to regain control of the situation. Should she apologize? Should she offer the premium water now, belatedly, in hopes of smoothing over any offense? Anxiety churned in her stomach as she realized she might already be too late. Evelyn, aware of Brooke's nervous glances, simply continued reviewing some documents on her phone. She made no immediate move to confront Brooke or to escalate the matter. Nonetheless, the stage was set. Brooke's next steps would either correct her earlier missteps or bury her deeper into a mess of her own making. In the background, Hazel continued to serve with quiet dedication, occasionally looking in Evelyn's direction with a mixture of relief and respect for her calm demeanor. As the flight moved into its second hour, a subtle tension lingered in the cabin. Brooke still wasn't entirely sure of Evelyn's identity or her level of influence, but each passing minute heightened her suspicion. Meanwhile, Evelyn kept her cool exterior, knowing that clarity would come soon enough. She had seen everything she needed to see, and in due time, she intended to address it. In this final segment, we continue the story with the same characters, Evelyn, Brooke, and Hazel, but the name of the airline, a noun, has been adjusted to reflect a different corporate identity in this climactic chapter. Several hours into the journey, Evelyn Lancaster closed the report she had been studying on her phone. The cabin lights had dimmed slightly as many passengers chose to nap. Meanwhile, the tension between her and Brooke Simmons had reached a tipping point. Brooke's once confident demeanor was gone, replaced by darting eyes and a forced smile. She had clearly begun to suspect that Evelyn was more than just a run-of-the-mill passenger. Though the flight was operated under the umbrella of Aerovista Airways, Evelyn's newly rebranded corporate name for the airline, few employees had direct contact with the company's elusive owner. Evelyn generally preferred anonymity, allowing her upper management teams to handle day-to-day operations. This time, however, she had chosen to fly incognito to personally assess how staff interacted with travelers. As the flight neared its final leg, Evelyn decided it was time to end the uncertainty. She paged Brooke, who approached with a hesitant smile. "Is there something I can help you with?" Brooke asked, her voice tinged with apprehension. Evelyn set aside her phone. "Yes, I'd like to speak with the captain as soon as possible. There's a pressing matter I need to discuss regarding cabin procedures and staff conduct." The color drained from Brooke's face. In most instances, a passenger requesting to speak directly with the captain was unusual, if not alarming. Nonetheless, protocol dictated she pass along the request. "Oh, of course," Brooke stammered. "But, may I ask why?" Evelyn's gaze was steady, yet not unkind. "I'll explain everything once Captain Warner arrives," she replied, referencing the pilot she had met briefly on a prior flight during a corporate function. "Thank you." Brooke nodded, forcing a tight smile, and headed toward the cockpit. When Captain Warner emerged a few minutes later, he wore a concerned expression. Beside him stood Hazel, who had been quietly filled in on the situation. Brooke trailed after them, hands clasped anxiously. Captain Warner greeted Evelyn with professional courtesy. "Ms. Lancaster," he said, using her real name, which Brooke registered with visible shock, "I understand you needed to speak with me." Evelyn inclined her head. "Thank you for coming, Captain. Yes, there's an issue we need to address. It concerns Flight Attendant Simmons and a series of oversights in passenger service." Her voice was calm but carried authority. Brooke swallowed hard, realizing her worst suspicions were confirmed. Evelyn's identity wasn't merely that of a higher-tier corporate employee, she was the owner of Aerovista Airways itself, the individual who signed off on major company decisions. Captain Warner gave Brooke a measured look, then turned to Evelyn. "Please continue," he said, his tone respectful yet firm. Evelyn briefly recounted the events of the flight, her polite requests for water, Brooke's dismissive and discriminatory responses, and Hazel's act of quietly bringing her a bottle despite Brooke's refusal. "This behavior is entirely counter to our company policy," Evelyn concluded. "We emphasize courtesy, empathy, and fairness to all passengers, whether they hold a premium status or not." Hazel, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, cast her eyes down. She felt torn between loyalty to her senior colleague and the knowledge that Evelyn was right. Brooke simply stared at the floor, unable to maintain eye contact. Captain Warner nodded slowly. "Ms. Lancaster, I'm sorry that you experienced this. It's unacceptable for any passenger, let alone for someone who built this airline from the ground up." His words were deliberate, acknowledging not just her ownership but also her vision for how Aerovista Airways should operate. Evelyn offered a gentle smile to Captain Warner. "Your apology is noted, but it's Brooke's actions we must address." She turned to face Brooke, who looked on the verge of tears. "I value every person who works for Aerovista Airways and want to see them succeed. But the kind of service you've shown today is not who we are. It's not who I am. Discrimination or preferential treatment based solely on perceived status doesn't belong in our company's culture." Brooke opened her mouth to speak, but words failed her. She knew the gravity of her error. In the hush that followed, the airline's core principle, every passenger, every time, felt like an indictment of her behavior. Evelyn continued, her voice compassionate but unyielding. "I understand that stress and assumptions can lead good people to make poor decisions. However, you've repeatedly refused a basic courtesy and made it clear you believed some passengers deserved better treatment than others. That mindset goes against everything I stand for." Tears gathered in Brooke's eyes. I'm so sorry," she managed to whisper. "I had no idea who you were. It's not an excuse, but I promise I'll never make that mistake again." Captain Warner cleared his throat. "Ms. Lancaster, as per protocol, if you wish to report a crew member's behavior, there's an immediate inquiry, followed by possible disciplinary action. Given your position, you have full authority to determine the outcome." Evelyn took a moment before responding. She knew that the flight attendant's career was at stake. While second chances were sometimes deserved, Brooke's disregard for standard courtesy had been glaring. Moreover, the repeated warnings from Evelyn had gone unheeded until now. "I'm requesting that Brooke be removed from this flight and placed on administrative leave pending further review," Evelyn stated firmly. "We cannot allow employees who display such disregard for our core values to continue in active service." Brooke's face crumpled as realization dawned. Her access to the airline systems, resources, and staff privileges would be revoked in short order. She had seen what happened to employees whose performance was flagged by upper management. The internal review was thorough, and rarely lenient for those who blatantly violated customer service standards. Looking at Hazel, who appeared torn, Evelyn offered reassurance. "Hazel, I appreciate how you stepped in. It demonstrates your commitment to doing the right thing. You have my gratitude, and, in turn, my support." The junior flight attendant gave a small nod. She seemed relieved that her actions were recognized rather than criticized. "Thank you, Ms. Lancaster," she said softly. Captain Warner placed a gentle hand on Brooke's shoulder. "I'll need you to gather your belongings. Another attendant will assume your duties for the remainder of the flight." The finality in his tone indicated that the decision was absolute. Brooke, trembling, managed to whisper, "I'm sorry," one last time before she turned to leave. Her exit was swift, and though a few nearby passengers took notice, most remained unaware of the full scope of her situation. In that moment, she recognized that her entire future in aviation hung in the balance. After Brooke departed, Captain Warner directed his attention back to Evelyn. "Is there anything else I can do for you?" he asked, his respect evident. Evelyn shook her head. "Thank you, Captain. That will be all for now. Please keep me informed of the formal review." With a polite incline of his head, Captain Warner returned to the cockpit, making arrangements for the short-staffed cabin. Hazel and another attendant seamlessly took over the tasks Brooke had left unfinished, ensuring the rest of the passengers experienced no interruptions in service. Evelyn settled back into her seat, quietly reflecting on the turbulent events that had just unfolded. Though it was never her intention to flex her authority publicly, she also felt a responsibility to uphold the standards she had set for Aerovista Airways. If one crew member's actions went unchecked, it could erode the trust and goodwill the airline worked so hard to foster with its customers. Within minutes, word of the incident spread discreetly among the cabin crew. Hazel did her best to maintain professionalism, offering refreshments and assistance to passengers who had been watching the exchange with curiosity. Several seats away, a frequent flyer who recognized Evelyn from a corporate newsletter gave her a subtle nod, as if to confirm he understood what had happened, and why it was necessary. When Flight 807 finally touched down, a member of ground staff was already waiting at the gate to escort Brooke for further questioning. The entire process, though carried out quietly, signified a strong stance against subpar service. Evelyn lingered in her seat until most passengers had deplaned. She didn't particularly crave the spotlight, her objectives had been achieved. She had validated Aerovista Airways' dedication to treating every passenger equally and ensuring staff members were held accountable for their behavior. Before leaving, Hazel approached with a respectful inclination of her head. "Thank you again for understanding," she murmured. "I hope the rest of your day goes smoothly." Evelyn gave a warm smile. "Because of people like you, Hazel, it will. Keep up the good work." Stepping off the plane, Evelyn was met by airport officials who discreetly guided her toward the VIP exit. Even though she traveled unassumingly, the staff had quickly adapted to the revelation of her identity. As she made her way through the terminal, she couldn't help but think how easily the entire incident could have been avoided, if only simple kindness and empathy had prevailed. Yet, she also believed strongly in second chances, and it was possible Brooke might learn from this experience. If that happened, perhaps someday she could return as a more conscientious member of the Aerovista Airways team. But for now, Evelyn felt reassured that the company she had built would continue to thrive under the principles of respect, equality, and genuine care for every person who set foot on an Aerovista plane. Evelyn Lancaster's footsteps echoed through the newly renovated corridors of SkyTravel Line's regional headquarters. It had been 3 weeks since the turbulent incident aboard Flight 807, a flight operated under another subsidiary brand, and the media whispers were finally beginning to die down. Yet, the consequences of one flight attendant's dismissive behavior loomed over the entire corporate structure. Evelyn had decided the time was ripe for an unflinching review of customer service protocols across all the airlines she owned, including SkyTravel Lines. On that fateful day, Evelyn had traveled incognito to experience firsthand how passengers were treated. She had discovered Brooke Simmons's blatant refusal to offer her water and had ultimately revealed her identity as the owner, leading to Brooke's immediate removal from the flight. The episode exposed a flaw in training and oversight that Evelyn could not ignore. Now, as she entered a large conference room on the top floor, she was greeted by a group of executives, including HR managers, veteran pilots, and a few department heads. Normally, such a gathering might be tense, but the atmosphere today bristled with heightened anxiety. No one was sure how extensive the changes would be, only that Evelyn had made it clear, the status quo was no longer acceptable. "Good morning, everyone," Evelyn began, her clear voice capturing the attention of those assembled. She rarely convened meetings in person, preferring to empower her directors to make day-to-day decisions. But the Brooke Simmons incident had personally affected her, and the time for a direct approach had arrived. "Let's talk about passenger experience, staff conduct, and where SkyTravel Lines stands in this new chapter." A hush settled in. Colin Richards, an HR director who had overseen the hiring of in-flight crews, shuffled nervously. He knew that some of the scrutiny would inevitably land on his department. "Ms. Lancaster," Colin began tentatively, "we've already started reviewing training protocols, especially regarding courtesy and inclusive service." Evelyn nodded but motioned for him to continue. "We found that while our official guidelines emphasize equal treatment for all passengers, a few employees have been pushing the idea of prioritizing premium guests to extremes," Colin said, referencing the type of behavior Brooke had displayed. "We suspect that some staff interpreted the emphasis on top-tier perks too rigidly." "Rigidly is putting it lightly," Evelyn responded, keeping her tone measured. "We have to remember that every passenger is essential to our success. The moment we start assigning worth based on superficial cues, we compromise our entire philosophy." A few seats away, Captain Warner adjusted his tie. He had been on duty during that unfortunate flight, and although not directly at fault, he still felt responsibility for everything that had happened on his watch. "I'd like to point out that many of our crew members, like Hazel Parker, do follow policy and go beyond expectations," he remarked. Hazel quietly provided water despite being instructed otherwise by Brooke. She truly embodied what SkyTravel Lines stands for. Evelyn smiled. She had a deep respect for employees who maintained the spirit of compassion and courtesy, even under pressure. Hazel's actions had likely prevented the situation from escalating further in the cabin. "Hazel is a prime example of our ideals in action," Evelyn affirmed. "And we should also note that positive employee conduct should be acknowledged publicly." In parallel with the meeting, Evelyn was discreetly orchestrating an internal audit. She had entrusted a small team to examine communications, crew performance evaluations, and even passenger feedback surveys. She intended to uncover whether Brooke's behavior was an isolated incident or symptomatic of a deeper cultural issue. Some results already suggested that a few flight attendants at SkyTravel Lines had been under the impression that VIPs deserved extra attention at the expense of everyone else. As the group delved further into discussion, Evelyn outlined a plan for improved training modules, including role-play sessions that would demonstrate how to handle requests fairly. She emphasized real-life scenarios, like a passenger politely asking for water, rather than hypothetical scripts that could be easily dismissed. "Our success depends on genuine empathy," she said, her gaze sweeping the room. "No manual can cover every nuance. We need people who are instinctively respectful." Colin then proposed an immediate refresher course for all cabin staff. He suggested that instructors use the real-life fiasco with Brooke as a teaching tool, names withheld, of course, but with enough detail to drive the lesson home. "It may feel uncomfortable," Colin said, "but a cautionary tale can sometimes resonate more powerfully than mere theory." Talk then shifted to Brooke Simmons's situation. Although the story of her dismissal had circulated among employees, the formal review process was still underway. Under normal circumstances, a flight attendant under investigation would have minimal contact with the airline. However, HR had arranged a meeting for Brooke to offer her side of the story. Evelyn, feeling it was only fair, agreed to attend but remained non-committal about the outcome. The next day, that meeting took place in a smaller conference room down the hall. The atmosphere was starkly different from the large gathering. Only 4 people were present: Evelyn, Colin, Brooke, and an HR representative to document the conversation. Brooke's posture was tense. She stared at her hands, barely glancing up at Evelyn. "Ms. Simmons," Evelyn began, her voice calm yet firm. "You're here to address the incident and explain what happened in your own words. I'd like to hear from you directly." Brooke swallowed hard. "First, I want to say I'm sorry," she managed. "When you asked for water, I had no idea who you were. I know that doesn't excuse what I did. But, everything in our orientation stressed that premium amenities are for certain fare classes. I took that policy too literally." Her words wavered, and she paused. "I've been under a lot of pressure lately. With our monthly targets, service guidelines, and stress to impress top-tier customers. I realize I lost sight of the basic principle of just being considerate." A small part of Evelyn softened at the admission, but she maintained a professional tone. "I understand that you may have felt pressured. However, stress doesn't justify demeaning a passenger, or ignoring a simple, polite request. Our policies explicitly state that courtesy is non-negotiable." "I know," Brooke whispered. "I can't change what happened. But I'd like a chance to prove I can do better. I truly love working in this industry." Evelyn considered her words carefully. While she believed in second chances, she also recognized the influence a single disgruntled or misguided crew member could have on overall morale. "Ms. Simmons, your case is unique because you deliberately refused a fundamental request, and then you doubled down when I asked a second time. It wasn't a single error, it was a pattern." Brooke lowered her head, silent. Colin stepped in, gently shifting the conversation. "We don't make these decisions lightly, Brooke. The formal review is ongoing, and we'll take your statement into account." The HR representative scribbled notes. "We'll provide our recommendation soon, but it's ultimately up to Ms. Lancaster and the executive team to decide if you remain with the airline." As the meeting concluded, Brooke rose to leave, eyes downcast. She managed a soft, "thank you," then walked out. Evelyn watched her go, torn between empathy for a remorseful employee and the need to uphold the airline standards. Over the next few days, Evelyn gathered input from multiple sources. In some ways, she believed Brooke's contrition might be sincere. However, the fact remained that Brooke's actions had been brazen, and she had disregarded repeated requests. A single day of poor judgment could often be remedied, but a consistent lack of respect for passengers was more troubling. Meanwhile, Captain Warner and Hazel Parker were busy carrying out the usual flight operations. Hazel, in particular, felt a wave of relief ripple through the staff after hearing that new training guidelines would be rolled out. She had endured subtle pushback from peers who accused her of showing off by assisting Evelyn. Hazel brushed such comments aside, focusing on doing her job with integrity. One afternoon, as Hazel was finalizing the cabin checks on a short-haul flight, she received an unexpected call from the HR office. The representative on the line asked if she would be willing to share her perspective on the flight where Evelyn was denied water. Hazel agreed, if only to ensure a complete and honest account. Though nervous, she reminded herself that telling the truth was the best course of action. On a crisp morning in midweek, Hazel made her way to the HR suite at SkyTravel Line's main facility. The building was a sleek structure of glass and steel, with the airline's name prominently displayed at the entrance. In a conference room, she found Colin, another HR staffer, and a note-taker waiting. They greeted her warmly, offering coffee and encouraging her to relax. "Hazel," Colin began, "we appreciate you coming in. We just have a few questions about your experience that day and how you perceived Brooke's behavior. Please speak openly." Taking a deep breath, Hazel recounted the moments leading up to her decision to secretly give Evelyn a bottle of water. She described Brooke's dismissive tone, her rigid interpretation of policy, and her outright refusal to accommodate a simple request. Hazel explained that she believed she was doing the right thing by quietly helping a passenger in need, even if it conflicted with Brooke's directions. The conversation flowed for nearly an hour. The HR panel asked detailed questions, clearly aiming to differentiate between an isolated misunderstanding and a deliberate breach of company policy. Hazel's recollection remained consistent. Brooke had been resolute, unkind, and dismissive, more than just overwhelmed or stressed. Once Hazel finished, the HR staff thanked her and ended the interview. Stepping back into the hallway, Hazel felt relief, but also sadness. She had once considered Brooke a capable colleague, if a bit strict. Now, she might never work alongside her again. But maybe that's for the best, Hazel thought, recalling how the entire situation had undermined the airline's reputation. In the subsequent days, the executive team at Sky Travel Lines wrapped up their inquiry. Evelyn reviewed the audit findings, employee statements, and countless pages of policy documents. Finally, she circulated a confidential memo to senior management announcing a forthcoming decision. When the announcement came, it was short and direct: Brooke's contract would be officially terminated. The rationale included repeated disregard for passenger care and violation of core service principles. An optional path to reapply after an extensive rehabilitative course was noted, but there were no guarantees. In a separate note, Evelyn emphasized that this dismissal was meant to remind everyone that no staff member was above respectful, considerate service. Simultaneously, a second memo praised Hazel Parker for exemplifying the standard Sky Travel Lines held dear, although it did not name her publicly. Evelyn believed that quietly honoring good conduct was more genuine than using a single employee as a grand example. The real focus, she insisted, belonged on the team as a whole, ensuring everyone embraced the fundamental value of treating passengers well. With that decision, the immediate crisis reached its conclusion, but Evelyn knew her work was far from over. Sky Travel Lines, and her other affiliated airlines, still had a long road ahead to reinforce the lessons learned. They would need updated training, consistent follow-ups, and a renewed commitment to the principles Evelyn had championed from the very beginning: empathy, fairness, and a dedication to serving passengers without prejudice. And so Part 4 drew to a close, with Brooke's fate determined and a wave of introspection rippling through the staff. Now the stage was set for a more comprehensive overhaul of how Sky Travel Lines, and every airline under Evelyn Lancaster's umbrella, operated in the years to come. In the days following Brooke Simmons's official termination from Sky Travel Lines, Evelyn Lancaster shifted her focus to another growing subsidiary in her aviation empire, Attendant Airlines. Although the incident had taken place under different branding, Evelyn's ownership interests spanned multiple carriers, all of which followed roughly the same operational policies. Recognizing that passenger service was paramount, she decided to hold a large-scale leadership summit among the various airlines she controlled. The goal: to ensure that the mistakes made on one flight would never be repeated across any brand. The summit took place at a sprawling conference center near Attendant Airlines' main hub. The location bustled with well-dressed managers, flight supervisors, and veteran pilots. Colorful banners emblazoned with Attendant's logo lined the corridors, each bearing the motto, "Rise above expectations." It was a fitting theme for the urgent task at hand, restoring unwavering confidence in service quality. Evelyn arrived early on the first morning, quietly observing as attendees poured in. She noticed how some carried an air of quiet determination, ready to learn and adapt, while others appeared apprehensive, uncertain of the changes the next few days might bring. Among the crowd, Hazel Parker stood out, her posture erect, her expression set with calm purpose. She had been asked to represent the Flight Attendant Corps for a panel discussion on the importance of empathy in airline service. Just before the summit's official start, Captain Warner walked up to Hazel, greeting her with a respectful nod. "Nervous?" he asked, noticing how she clutched a folder of notes close to her chest. "A little," Hazel admitted, offering a small smile. "I'm not used to giving speeches. But Ms. Lancaster wanted me to share my experiences, and I feel it's important to be honest about what happened on that flight." Captain Warner placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry. You're more prepared than you think. And honesty is exactly what we need. Soon after, the conference hall filled with nearly 200 attendees. Evelyn took the stage, her presence commanding yet approachable. She began by recounting the founding principles that had guided all her airlines: respect, innovation, and a commitment to putting passengers first. Then, without naming Brooke Simmons, she summarized the story of how an employee's lapse in judgment prompted a company-wide reevaluation. "This incident, as unfortunate as it was, gives us an opportunity," Evelyn said, addressing the crowd. "We can learn from this and implement stronger, clearer guidelines that honor every passenger's worth. We owe it to our customers to never let an oversight like that happen again." Throughout the day, various sessions and workshops took place. One panel discussion featured Hazel, a senior HR manager from Attendant Airlines, and two operations directors. Their topic: humanity over hierarchy, practical ways to ensure every passenger feels valued. Hazel spoke candidly about stepping in to help a traveler who had been unfairly dismissed, even though it meant defying a senior colleague. She emphasized how small gestures, like offering a cup of water, could have a profound impact on an airline's reputation and on the passenger's experience. "By not overthinking rank or perceived status, we can act on what's right in the moment," Hazel explained to the rapt audience. "It's about being proactive instead of reactive." As the applause died down, a member of the audience raised a hand. "Hazel, what gives you the courage to act even when it might mean going against your superior?" Hazel paused thoughtfully. "In that specific moment, I focused on what Attendant Airlines, and all of Ms. Lancaster's brands, are supposed to stand for. I didn't see how following misguided instructions could be justified. If we truly want to excel, we have to be consistent in our kindness." Among those listening intently was a regional manager named Malik Whitaker. Responsible for coordinating flight attendants in the Southeast region, he had grappled with staff morale issues for months. After Hazel's panel, he approached her, intrigued by the notion that one simple act could carry so much weight. "You made an impact by doing something as basic as handing over a bottle of water," he said. "It's astonishing how a small gesture can ripple out." Hazel nodded in agreement. Sometimes it really is the smallest, most direct actions that reveal where an organization's heart lies. While the conference aimed to reinforce best practices, behind the scenes, Evelyn was also dealing with the aftermath of Brooke Simmons's departure. Brooke had made one last attempt to appeal the termination, sending an emotional letter to Attendant Airlines' corporate office. Though her dismissal occurred under a different airline brand, the overarching corporate chain of command still fell under Evelyn's purview. In the letter, Brooke expressed regret and pleaded for another opportunity, suggesting she could undergo new training or counseling. Late in the evening, after the summit's first day concluded, Evelyn retreated to her private hotel suite. The letter from Brooke weighed on her thoughts. It was riddled with regret but offered little in the way of tangible evidence that Brooke had genuinely shifted her perspective. Evelyn recalled the interview in which Brooke tried to rationalize her actions by citing policy misunderstandings. There was something about the tone of the letter that made Evelyn wonder if Brooke sought forgiveness more to salvage her career than to address the root of her behavior. Nevertheless, Evelyn believed in the possibility of change. She drafted a measured response, conveying that while she acknowledged Brooke's remorse, re-employment would only be considered if Brooke completed a specialized conflict resolution program and could demonstrate a new mindset. The letter ended with a gentle but firm note: "Respect for all passengers is not negotiable. We hold ourselves, and our employees, to this standard." The following morning at the summit, Captain Warner led a workshop on transparency in the cockpit, communicating clearly with passengers and crew. A veteran pilot who commanded respect throughout the organization, he stressed that clear, honest communication could resolve many conflicts before they escalated. When people understand the reasons behind certain actions, they're more likely to remain calm, he said, referencing everything from weather delays to in-flight service protocols. During a break, Captain Warner and Hazel found themselves discussing the letter Brooke had sent. News traveled swiftly among key staff, and while neither had seen the exact text, they knew the gist. "I wonder if she truly wants to reform or if she's just grasping at straws," Hazel mused. "I saw how she treated Ms. Lancaster on that flight. She refused to change her attitude even after multiple requests." "It's hard to say," Warner replied. "Sometimes, people need a wake-up call. But you're right, unless she's genuinely willing to adjust her worldview, she might fall back into the same patterns." Their conversation was cut short by the next set of panels, but Hazel carried that thought in the back of her mind for the remainder of the summit. Meanwhile, in a separate wing of the conference center, HR directors collaborated on updating the official code of conduct for Attendant Airlines. Drawing on the lessons learned from the other airlines under Evelyn's ownership, they drafted language explicitly forbidding staff members from withholding basic amenities based on perceived passenger status. The new code mandated consistent courtesy training, requiring every flight attendant to complete an annual refresher that involved scenario-based assessments. As word of these changes filtered out, some employees expressed relief. They had grown weary of feeling pressured to cater exclusively to high-paying passengers, worried that ignoring others might come back to haunt them. Others, however, worried about overburdening staff if everyone received the same attention. Evelyn addressed those concerns in her closing keynote. "Fair and equal treatment doesn't mean less care for premium flyers, it means raising the standard of care for everyone." The final day of the summit ended with a recognition ceremony. Attendant Airlines honored employees who had gone above and beyond in exemplifying the brand's values. To Hazel's surprise, her name was called alongside 10 others. Nervous but proud, she walked on stage, where the chief operating officer presented her with a commemorative pin for embodiment of compassionate service. The auditorium erupted in applause, many in the crowd rising to their feet. In that ovation, Hazel felt validation for her difficult choice to do the right thing in defiance of Brooke's instructions. She also sensed the beginning of a cultural shift. A renewed understanding that actions grounded in kindness elevated everyone, from first-time flyers to frequent travelers. After the ceremony, Evelyn approached Hazel, awarding her a heartfelt hug. "You deserve this," Evelyn said. "Thank you for reminding us all what true service looks like." Tears stung Hazel's eyes, though she managed a smile. "Thank you, Ms. Lancaster. I just hope that we keep this energy alive once the summit is over." "We will," Evelyn assured her. "It's not about one event. It's about a continuous commitment." In the days that followed, Attendant Airlines made headlines for its pledge to champion equity in passenger service. A press release declared that the airline, and by extension, all of Evelyn's aviation brands, would be rolling out new training initiatives aimed at cultivating empathy and fairness. Customer feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with many praising the airline for not sweeping the issue under the rug. As for Brooke Simmons, her fate remained uncertain. She received Evelyn's letter, which laid out the requirements for any chance of a second chance. For now, she remained outside the company's roster, grappling with the weight of her actions and whether she could truly evolve. While an opportunity for redemption existed, it would require a genuine transformation, one that could not be faked merely to regain employment. All the while, Evelyn kept her usual low profile, quietly overseeing the implementation of these new guidelines. She saw the necessity of consistent follow-through, knowing that well-intentioned reforms often faltered without persistent support. Leaders at Attendant Airlines were tasked with bi-monthly check-ins to ensure staff was adapting to the revised policies. Flight attendants received real-time feedback from their supervisors, fostering an environment of open dialogue and continuous improvement. By the time Evelyn departed the conference center, she felt cautiously optimistic. Attendant Airlines and its sister carriers were on a path toward a more inclusive future, one where neither rank nor superficial judgments overshadowed the fundamental mission of serving passengers with care and respect. Thus, Part 5 concluded with genuine progress, a renewed spirit of cooperation, and the collective hope that this cultural shift could maintain momentum across all of Evelyn's aviation enterprises. 6 months had passed since the industry-wide summit at Attendant Airlines, and Evelyn Lancaster found herself turning her attention to one of her newest ventures, Trans-Sky Services. Originally established to provide specialized charter flights and freight operations, Trans-Sky Services had recently expanded into commercial passenger routes, a bold move designed to integrate all of Evelyn's airlines under a common operational philosophy. Despite being the smallest of Evelyn's brands, Trans-Sky Services was growing rapidly. It prided itself on intimate flight experiences, offering unique routes and personalized touches that larger carriers often overlooked. Yet, as the new commercial division ramped up, so did the need for well-trained flight crews who embodied the same values Evelyn championed across her aviation empire. Eager to ensure these ideals took root early, Evelyn planned a surprise inspection on one of Trans-Sky's newly launched passenger flights. She booked a seat under an alias, wearing modest attire and carrying a simple tote bag, much as she had done all those months ago. This time, however, she had no intention of concealing her identity if asked directly. She simply wanted to observe how her newest airline handled customer service on a typical day. When Evelyn arrived at the gate, she was greeted by a smiling gate agent who kindly directed her to a short, business-class queue. Even though Trans-Sky Services didn't offer a massive first-class cabin like some major airlines, it still provided 2 tiers of seating, business class and economy. Evelyn scanned the area, observing passengers of all ages, some traveling for business and others for leisure. The atmosphere felt relaxed, but she knew from experience that appearances could be deceptive. Boarding began, and Evelyn took her place in seat 2A, near the bulkhead. She slipped off her jacket and settled in, quietly watching the flight attendants as they assisted passengers with overhead bins and seat assignments. A younger attendant named Carmen looked especially diligent, guiding travelers with a reassuring smile. Meanwhile, her colleague, a more experienced attendant named Ron, directed the flow of people but appeared a bit harried, occasionally snapping at passengers who were slow to stow their items. Evelyn wasn't necessarily alarmed, but she filed it away in her mind. Over the next few minutes, she listened to the interactions around her. Carmen spoke kindly to a family whose children were excited about their first flight, while Ron rushed a group of older passengers, curtly telling them to hurry along and sit down so others could pass by. It was a subtle imbalance in approach, but Evelyn recognized it as a potential red flag. Once the aircraft door was sealed and the safety briefing commenced, Carmen took center stage for the demonstration. She was precise, thorough, and her friendly demeanor put everyone at ease. Ron, by contrast, seemed distant, going through the motions without much engagement. Evelyn suspected that stress might be a factor. Some employees struggled more than others to remain composed under the demands of flight schedules. Shortly after takeoff, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and Carmen and Ron began the initial beverage service. As Carmen started with the front row, she looked delighted to offer bottled water, sparkling sodas, or juice to the first few passengers she encountered. When she reached Evelyn, her smile never wavered. "Good afternoon," she said. "May I offer you anything to drink?" Evelyn requested a bottle of water. Carmen gladly handed it over, then proceeded to the next seat. Watching this smooth service made Evelyn feel hopeful that the new training protocols were indeed making a difference, at least with some of the crew. Meanwhile, Ron was working the opposite aisle, sounding brusque as he rattled off the available drinks. An older gentleman politely asked for ginger ale, explaining he often got air sickness. Ron sighed in clear frustration when the passenger inquired if there was any special brand or if they had a caffeine-free version. "Sir, I'm not sure," Ron snapped. "We only have the standard selection. You'll have to take what we've got." Carmen noticed this exchange from the corner of her eye. Sensing tension, she quickly pivoted to help. "We do have a non-caffeinated ginger ale option," she interjected, offering a reassuring smile to the passenger. She reached into the cart, retrieved the correct can, and handed it to him with a small bag of crackers. The man thanked her warmly. Ron's expression soured. He muttered something about time constraints under his breath and continued down the aisle. Evelyn's instincts kicked in. This was an ideal situation to see how the new airline's chain of command would address a flight attendant whose attitude risked undermining the company's reputation. As the flight continued, Carmen's approach exemplified the empathetic model Evelyn had spent months reinforcing across her brands. Whether it was helping a mother calm a fussy toddler or patiently answering questions from a nervous first-time flyer, Carmen exuded the spirit of genuine service. Ron, on the other hand, grew more irritable as passengers voiced any request beyond a simple beverage. Whenever someone asked for an extra napkin or inquired about the flight's arrival time, he replied curtly and hurried away. Finally, about an hour into the flight, Evelyn decided to test how Ron might respond to a basic favor. She pressed the flight attendant call button. Carmen was busy further down the aisle, so Ron appeared, looking strained. "Yes?" he asked, arms folded. Evelyn kept her tone polite. "I'm feeling a bit chilly. Could I get a blanket, please?" Ron huffed. "Blankets are limited, and we usually offer them first to those who request them during boarding. I'll see if there are any left, but I can't make any promises." Without waiting for Evelyn's reply, he strode off. Moments later, Carmen passed by. Catching the slight furrow in Evelyn's brow, she paused. "Is everything all right?" Evelyn nodded calmly. "I asked Ron for a blanket. I'm not sure if he's checking or if he's too busy." Carmen gave a sympathetic smile. "I'll grab one from the overhead compartment, we definitely have a few more." Within seconds, she returned with a soft blanket and handed it to Evelyn. "Please let me know if you need anything else," she said kindly. Evelyn thanked her, once again noting Carmen's intuitive empathy. Ron never did circle back to see if Evelyn still needed anything. After the beverage service ended, he retreated to the galley, where Evelyn overheard him grumbling to a colleague about demanding travelers and pointless requests. Shortly before the flight's descent, Carmen began collecting trash and offering final top-offs on beverages. She neared Evelyn's seat and spoke in a hushed tone. "I apologize if Ron came across as rude. We're supposed to work as a team, but he's been on edge lately." Evelyn appreciated the discreet explanation, though she also recognized that staffing challenges could bring out the worst in some crew members. She patted Carmen's arm gently. "Thank you for your help," she responded, "and for going out of your way to look after everyone." When the plane touched down, Evelyn awaited her chance to reveal herself. As the passengers prepared to deplane, she quietly slipped a business card into Carmen's hand. A card emblazoned with Trans-Sky Services' main office number and Evelyn's personal extension. Carmen's eyes widened in confusion. "Let me introduce myself," Evelyn said softly, stepping aside so they wouldn't block the aisle. "I'm Evelyn Lancaster, the founder of Trans-Sky Services. You've shown the sort of service I want this airline to be known for." Carmen's face reddened with a mix of surprise and pride. "Ms. Lancaster. Thank you. I had no idea." "That's the point," Evelyn replied with a warm smile. "I prefer to see things as they are. You, Carmen, are exactly the kind of flight attendant I value." Nearby, Ron overheard. He froze for a moment, realizing the woman he'd been dismissive to was, in fact, his ultimate boss. A wave of discomfort crossed his features. He contemplated an apology, but Evelyn's attention was already on Carmen. Before he could muster the courage to speak, Evelyn was gone, blending into the stream of departing passengers. Later that day, Evelyn held a brief meeting with the station manager at the Trans-Sky Services hub. She described her experience on the flight in clear, constructive terms. "We have a phenomenal attendant in Carmen," she noted. "But Ron's attitude raises concerns. He's either burnt out or not aligned with our values. Either way, we have to address it." The station manager promised to schedule a conversation with Ron, ensuring that he understood the airline's cultural expectations. "We'll handle it promptly," the manager vowed. "It's crucial we maintain the standard you've set." Returning to her office, Evelyn felt a swirl of emotions. On one hand, Carmen's kindness reassured her that the training modules were taking effect. On the other, Ron's performance showed that gaps remained. No single seminar or handbook could fully eradicate apathy. It would take ongoing leadership, accountability, and perhaps tough decisions about who truly belonged in the TransSky Services family. Over the following weeks, Evelyn formalized a new mentorship program for TransSky's cabin crew. The initiative paired seasoned flight attendants displaying exemplary empathy with newer hires or those struggling to meet company values. Carmen was one of the first invited to become a mentor, despite her relatively short tenure, precisely because she embodied the qualities Evelyn wanted to promote. At the same time, Ron was placed on a performance improvement plan. HR, along with the station manager, would monitor his interactions and provide additional support or retraining if needed. The outcome would depend largely on Ron's willingness to change. If he truly wanted to remain at TransSky Services, he would have to adopt a new approach, or face consequences similar to what Brooke Simmons had experienced. In an internal memo, Evelyn reiterated her vision for TransSky Services, a boutique airline that thrived on personalized, compassionate service for all. She encouraged leaders to frequently meet with staff, solicit feedback from passengers, and intervene early when they saw potential issues. Most importantly, the memo emphasized that leadership must lead by example. Any manager or senior employee failing to model kindness and professionalism would be held accountable. Thus, as Part 6 concluded, a new chapter began for TransSky Services, reflecting Evelyn's broader mission. From the ashes of one flight attendant's dismissive behavior, a wave of reforms was rippling across the many airlines under Evelyn's banner. Though not every employee would immediately embrace these changes, the seeds of a more empathetic culture had been planted. With attentive oversight, genuine mentorship, and a clear commitment to accountability, Evelyn believed TransSky Services, and all her aviation brands, would continue to rise above expectations for years to come. Evelyn Lancaster leaned against the tinted glass railing of her office suite, overlooking the bustling ramps and runways of SkyQuest Aviation. Although she owned multiple airline brands, SkyQuest was her latest acquisition, a mid-sized carrier with a strong regional presence. Having recently integrated the more rigorous service guidelines she championed, Evelyn was determined to ensure that SkyQuest embraced the same values of empathy, fairness, and accountability that she'd been instilling across all her ventures. In the 6 months since her surprise check on TransSky Services, Evelyn had watched as incremental improvements took shape everywhere. Flight attendants reported fewer complaints, passenger satisfaction scores rose. Yet, she knew that long-term change demanded consistent vigilance. Today, she'd scheduled a meeting with several senior SkyQuest managers to discuss a new mentorship program, similar to the one she had pioneered before, where experienced, service-oriented attendants would guide newer team members. As she stepped away from the window, her assistant notified her that the managers were ready in the conference room. Gathered around a mahogany table, the group of executives greeted Evelyn warmly. At the forefront was Regina Morgan, SkyQuest's Director of In-Flight Operations. Regina was known for her methodical approach to crew management. She was both efficient and empathetic, a combination that resonated with Evelyn. Next to Regina sat a pair of mid-level supervisors, each responsible for overseeing route-specific teams of flight attendants. They brought field reports and first-hand insights to the discussion, ensuring that corporate decisions wouldn't be made in a vacuum. After Evelyn thanked everyone for coming, Regina projected a series of slides summarizing their progress. "We've incorporated the new service guidelines," she began, referencing the passenger-first policy that Evelyn mandated. "The attendants have completed the mandatory refreshers. Most have adapted well, though we have a few outliers who struggle with the emphasis on personalized, considerate service." Evelyn nodded. "That's to be expected. Let's focus on giving them the right support. If we can't turn things around, we'll reevaluate those individuals. But first, I want to believe in second chances if possible." Regina continued, "We've also improved our employee feedback loop. Crew members can now submit concerns anonymously, ensuring they feel safe reporting any issues. This has already helped us address minor conflicts before they escalate." Just as the conversation pivoted to mentorship programs, a gentle knock sounded at the door. Hazel Parker, who had arrived at SkyQuest's Hellightly. Evelyn had invited her to share experiences from other carriers, particularly her insights on training new hires in real-world scenarios. Though still a junior attendant by rank, Hazel had become something of a luminary in Evelyn's circle, a walking example of how a single act of kindness could resonate throughout an entire organization. "Hazel, come in," Evelyn said, waving her toward an empty seat. "Everyone, this is Hazel Parker. She's been kind enough to help us refine our mentorship model." The managers greeted Hazel warmly. Regina offered a handshake, and Hazel settled into the chair. She carried a small binder and an air of quiet confidence. "Thank you for having me," Hazel began. "I've seen how fostering collaboration and compassion can transform the workplace, especially among flight attendants who are constantly under pressure." Over the next hour, Hazel described how small gestures, like guiding a passenger to stow their bag or calmly reassuring someone who's anxious, could set the tone for a flight. She advocated pairing new recruits with crew members who exemplified empathy, so that positive habits were ingrained from day one. The managers asked thoughtful questions, jotting down notes about scheduling constraints and how to balance mentorship with existing duties. Once the formal meeting concluded, Regina and Hazel lingered for an informal chat. Hazel recounted how, during a flight the previous week, she'd witnessed a colleague skillfully calm a panicking passenger by using simple breathing techniques and reassuring words. "It just shows the power of empathy," Hazel said, her eyes bright. "We really can make people feel safe in stressful moments." Evelyn listened, pleased by Hazel's contagious optimism. But her thoughts drifted briefly to Brooke Simmons, the former flight attendant whose actions had sparked much of this corporate introspection. Brooke's fate had been sealed at another airline, her termination upheld after multiple reviews. Still, Evelyn occasionally wondered if Brooke had found a way to learn from her mistakes or if she remained embittered. Although each airline brand functioned somewhat autonomously, news often traveled quickly, and there'd been murmurs that Brooke might try to apply to SkyQuest under a different capacity. Evelyn had quietly instructed HR to vet any new hires thoroughly to avoid a repeat of that fiasco. Later in the day, Evelyn and Hazel walked through the corridors, passing the bustling operational areas where flight attendants picked up their rosters and pre-flight briefings. The atmosphere here was lively, a testament to SkyQuest's rising morale. Posters on the walls reminded staff of the new service philosophy: every passenger, every time, no exceptions. Yet, Evelyn noticed a few attendants who seemed less enthused, scanning these posters with skeptical eyes. She made a mental note to keep an ear to the ground, ready to address any negative undercurrents. That evening, Hazel was scheduled to join a SkyQuest flight to observe how the new guidelines were playing out in real time. She would not be wearing a special uniform or carrying an inspector's badge, but rather flying as an extra attendant, offering help and taking notes. Evelyn believed this kind of immersion was the only way to get an authentic view. Once on board, Hazel met the flight's senior attendant, a cheerful woman named Rhea, who welcomed Hazel warmly. Rhea introduced Hazel to the rest of the crew, including a somewhat reserved attendant named Mark. He appeared polite but distant, contributing little to the initial briefing. As they discussed emergency procedures and service flow, Hazel caught Mark rolling his eyes at the mention of the "every passenger, every time" mantra. She kept her observation to herself, determined to see how Mark actually behaved with travelers. Takeoff went smoothly. Hazel and Rhea managed the front rows, offering water, coffee, or tea to a variety of business travelers who seemed grateful for the friendly service. In contrast, Mark dealt with economy seating, and though Hazel was too far away to hear all his interactions, she noticed he moved quickly down the aisle, rarely pausing to chat with passengers. Mid-flight, a woman in seat 12B politely asked Mark if he could help her get a cup of warm water for her medication. Hazel, who was restocking supplies nearby, saw Mark shrug and say, "Can't it wait until the regular drink service?" The passenger looked taken aback, glancing around uncomfortably. Hazel stepped in, offering an apologetic smile. "I can help," she said gently. "It's no trouble at all." A quick trip to the galley later, she returned with a cup of warm water, ensuring the passenger had what she needed. After that interaction, Hazel discreetly pulled Mark aside. "Hey, is everything okay?" she asked in a neutral tone, not wanting to sound accusatory. "I noticed you seemed in a hurry back there." Mark exhaled. "I don't mean to be rude," he admitted, "but I'm stressed. We have these new guidelines that make it feel like we have to coddle everyone. That's not how it worked at my last job." Hazel understood the sentiment, recalling how some flight attendants felt burdened by what they perceived as extra tasks. "I get it," she said. "But giving a passenger warm water for medication is hardly coddling. It's basic care. And trust me, it goes a long way." He nodded, though he still appeared uneasy. Hazel recognized this as a training gap. Mark might be resistant, but he wasn't openly defiant. Some part of him might simply fear the added workload. She mentally catalogued this as feedback to provide Regina and Evelyn. The new policy was well-intentioned, but certain staff might need practical strategies to manage time while still offering thoughtful service. When the flight concluded and passengers disembarked, Hazel observed Mark forcing a polite smile as he bid them farewell. A few nodded in appreciation, but his expression was clearly strained. Rhea, on the other hand, left a lasting impression of genuine warmth with her hearty, "Thank you, have a wonderful day." She even helped a frail elderly couple gather their coats, ushering them gently down the aisle. Back at SkyQuest's operations lounge, Hazel jotted down key takeaways. A portion of the crew seemed to embrace the new approach wholeheartedly, another portion, like Mark, felt anxious or unconvinced. Before heading to the hotel, Hazel swung by Rhea's side. "You did a fantastic job," Hazel praised. "Do you have any suggestions on how to help attendants who are struggling?" Rhea smiled. "Mentoring, definitely. I've offered to chat with Mark, show him a few time-saving tricks. Sometimes people don't know how to be friendly and efficient at the same time." Hazel nodded, grateful for Rhea's proactive attitude. "That's exactly the spirit we need," she said, reflecting on how mentorship aligned with what she and Evelyn had been discussing earlier. The following day, Hazel met privately with Regina Morgan and relayed her observations. "Mark isn't hostile, he's just overwhelmed," Hazel explained. "He might benefit from shadowing someone who's nailed the balance, like Rhea." Regina took detailed notes. "We'll set that up." "Thank you, Hazel. This is precisely why we wanted you to do these in-person assessments." Over the next week, Evelyn received thorough reports from both Hazel and Regina about the trial runs of the mentorship initiative at SkyQuest Aviation. She learned how Rhea had taken Mark under her wing, demonstrating techniques for quick, polite interactions. Early feedback suggested Mark's attitude was already improving. Passengers in his section had begun leaving more positive remarks, noting his helpful assistance with small requests. Meanwhile, the airline's leadership team continued rolling out training sessions. They fostered open forums where attendants could share challenges and tips with one another. Evelyn visited the training center one afternoon, quietly observing the interplay among flight attendants. To her satisfaction, many were quick to exchange encouraging words, "I used to struggle with that too," or "Here's a trick to speed up the coffee service without missing a beat." By the end of that day, Evelyn felt a sense of guarded optimism. While no airline, let alone an entire group of them, would be transformed overnight, she saw tangible progress at SkyQuest Aviation. Employees were learning to navigate the balance between efficiency and genuine care. Some still hesitated or needed extra support, but the overall trend was moving in the right direction. Reflecting on past challenges, especially the Brooke Simmons debacle, Evelyn recognized that a single toxic perspective could metastasize if left unchecked. Yet, she also believed in the power of patient, consistent leadership to cultivate meaningful change. The synergy of a well-trained staff, supportive management, and open communication channels could usher in an era where the notion of every passenger, every time, no exceptions, was more than just a slogan. In this evolving tapestry of progress, SkyQuest Aviation had become another stage upon which Evelyn's vision played out. Steady improvements in morale and performance offered proof that her approach was viable. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be swift, but part by part, flight by flight, the culture was shifting. And as Evelyn looked toward the future, she felt renewed conviction that every airline under her umbrella could, indeed, rise to the standard she'd set. A month after implementing the mentorship program at SkyQuest Aviation, Evelyn Lancaster turned her attention to Nova Sky Connect, one of her pioneering carriers that specialized in long-haul international routes. Nova Sky had once been the crown jewel of her aviation portfolio, renowned for luxurious cabins, extensive in-flight entertainment, and an esteemed global reputation. Yet, even shining jewels could accumulate tarnish over time. Evelyn had received sporadic reports that certain Nova Sky routes were falling below her expected service standards, particularly on flights staffed by a few tenured attendants reluctant to adapt to new company philosophies. Curious and concerned, Evelyn scheduled a closed-door session with Nova Sky's executive team to gauge the situation. The meeting took place in an imposing boardroom high above the city, offering panoramic views of distant skyscrapers and rolling clouds. The carrier's distinctive branding, an elegant emblem of soaring wings, adorned the walls. Despite the prestige, the mood among the executives was cautious. They knew Evelyn had a low tolerance for complacency. "Thank you all for gathering," Evelyn began. "Nova Sky Connect has always held a special place in my heart. It was the first airline I truly expanded on a global scale. However, I've heard rumblings that some staff members aren't living up to our evolving standards of service." Her voice was measured but earnest, clearly signaling she expected substantive answers. The VP of Operations, a detail-oriented leader named Martin Cho, cleared his throat. "Ms. Lancaster, our data indicates that 90% of our crew are performing at or above expectations. The trouble seems to lie with a small handful who, frankly, believe that the old ways are sufficient, those who think luxury alone compensates for any lapse in basic courtesy." Evelyn leaned forward, lacing her fingers together. "Luxury doesn't replace kindness," she said flatly. "No amount of plush seating or gourmet meals will fix an indifferent attitude. Do we have names? Situations that exemplify the behavior in question?" Martin glanced at a folder of reports. "We have a few repeated complaints about inattentiveness, dismissive responses to simple requests, and in rare cases, outright rudeness. Mostly on certain long-haul flights between the US and Europe." Evelyn took a slow breath, recalling how similar issues had arisen in the past with Brooke Simmons, who had disregarded what she perceived as lower-status passengers. "We need a plan of action," she said. "This airline was once a model for impeccable hospitality. I won't see it dragged down by a few who refuse to evolve." After some discussion, it was decided that Evelyn would handpick a small team to conduct unannounced in-flight evaluations. Hazel Parker, who had proved instrumental in diagnosing issues at other carriers, was an obvious choice. Accompanying her would be Captain Warner, who had volunteered to take a short leave from his current position to observe cabin interactions from the passenger's perspective. The team would board several Nova Sky long-haul flights, each time under the guise of typical travelers, and compile reports on what they witnessed. A week later, Hazel and Captain Warner arrived at Nova Sky Connect's Grand Terminal. Together, they checked in like ordinary passengers, their seats booked in premium economy, close enough to gauge service quality without the fanfare of the top-tier cabin. Once on board, they separated to blend into different rows, ensuring a broader view of the flight attendant's behavior. At first, everything seemed pleasant. The attendants greeted them with polite smiles as they found their seats, demonstrating the standard professionalism one would expect. Yet, as the flight wore on, Hazel noticed subtle cracks. When a passenger asked for assistance in adjusting a seat that wouldn't recline, the attendant, an older man named Russell, simply muttered, "Try pushing harder," and walked away, offering no further help. The passenger looked at Hazel helplessly, and Hazel, in turn, discreetly showed him how to press the recline button more firmly. Russell never returned to check on the issue. Meanwhile, Captain Warner observed a second attendant who appeared overly focused on pampering the business class area while ignoring the premium economy rows. Multiple times, the attendant strolled through with a tray of beverages meant solely for business class flyers, declining to acknowledge passenger requests in premium economy. When a woman asked for a simple cup of water, the attendant merely responded, "I'll come back," and never did. During the mid-flight meal service, Hazel caught another disconcerting exchange. A young mother traveling with her toddler needed hot water to warm a baby bottle. An attendant she hadn't seen before, named Felicia, waved the mother off, suggesting she wait until the meal carts were stowed because it was inconvenient to fetch boiling water at that moment. Hazel quietly slipped to the galley, approached Felicia, and offered a friendly solution: "We can quickly use the kettle between meal preps. It takes just a moment." Felicia shrugged and complied, but her sigh of exasperation didn't go unnoticed by Hazel. While no single action was as egregious as Brooke Simmons's outright refusal to serve water, these minor dismissals accumulated into a worrisome pattern. Passengers were left feeling neglected, as if their requests weren't important enough to warrant immediate attention. Throughout the flight, Captain Warner took copious notes, mentally contrasting Nova Sky's conduct with the strides made at SkyQuest Aviation and Trans-Sky Services. Eventually, he and Hazel reconnected in the terminal after landing. Exchanging impressions, they agreed that the flight illustrated a lingering culture among certain Nova Sky attendants who believed brand prestige outweighed the need for genuine empathy. They relayed their findings to Martin Cho and Evelyn in a debrief session. None of the attendants outright refused basic requests, Hazel pointed out. But the dismissive or delayed responses show a complacency that goes against our push for consistent kindness. Captain Warner concurred, adding, "It's a mindset issue. They think the airline's reputation is built on premium seats and fancy menus, but they forget that genuine courtesy is what truly secures passenger loyalty." Evelyn listened, her face a controlled mask. Though not as explosive as the Brooke Simmons incident, the pattern was concerning. She recognized that Nova Sky's identity as a luxury carrier might have led some employees to overvalue status-based perks rather than the everyday human touches. After an extended discussion, she decided on a multi-pronged approach: targeted refresher workshops. Specific flight attendants with recurring complaints would undergo hands-on training led by Hazel and other high-performing cabin crew from sister airlines. Mystery Passenger Program. Nova Sky would continue to conduct surprise in-flight evaluations on random long-haul routes, ensuring that complacent attendants couldn't just perform when they suspected an inspection. Revised incentive structure. Bonuses and accolades would no longer hinge primarily on business class feedback. Instead, attendants who consistently received positive remarks from passengers across all cabin classes would be recognized more prominently. In the weeks that followed, Nova Sky Connect rolled out these reforms. The workshops were perhaps the most impactful, with Hazel personally participating in several sessions to demonstrate simple but effective approaches, responding to the call button promptly, offering immediate alternatives for small issues, and most importantly, adopting a mindset of "every traveler counts." She walked attendants through real scenarios, from seat recline malfunctions to mothers needing hot water. "It's not about spoiling everyone," Hazel would say. "It's about ensuring no one feels overlooked." Some attendants, like Felicia, were initially defensive, insisting they already provided top-tier service. Yet, practical demonstrations opened their eyes to how even tiny gestures, like an extra napkin or a timely cup of water, could alleviate a passenger's stress. Over time, attitudes began to shift, though progress was uneven. A few holdouts privately complained about excessive kindness, scoffing that it slowed down their workflow. For them, management spelled out the stakes: comply with the new standards or risk disciplinary action, much like other carriers had enforced. Evelyn continued to monitor reports, and the effect of these changes soon became evident in passenger surveys. Comments highlighted a renewed warmth among Nova Sky attendants, praising attentive staff and professional courtesy. While not every negative pattern had vanished, the overall customer experience notably improved. Martin Cho reported a decrease in complaint forms, especially from the previously problematic routes. During one concluding check-in at Nova Sky's headquarters, Evelyn found herself reflecting on the airline's evolution. Meeting with Martin Cho and the HR lead, she reviewed the improved satisfaction metrics. "We're on the right track," she observed, tapping a chart that showed an upward trend. "But we can't rest on these initial gains. Keep the evaluations going, keep the training strong." Before leaving, Evelyn made a point of speaking to several attendants in the break room. Among them was Felicia, who approached Evelyn, appearing subdued. "I just wanted to say thank you," Felicia began softly. "I didn't realize how many little moments I was ignoring. This training made me see how much a passenger's request can mean to them." Evelyn smiled gently. "I'm glad to hear that. Remember, every interaction matters. People can choose countless airlines, it's our attitude that sets us apart." Felicia nodded earnestly. With those parting words, Evelyn departed Nova Sky Connect, heartened by the changes underway but mindful that continuous vigilance was essential. As she stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, she envisioned a future where Nova Sky's famous luxury was matched, every day, on every flight, by the simple power of genuine care. Nearly a year had passed since Evelyn Lancaster began her quest to standardize superior service across her growing network of airlines. Her latest focus was a smaller regional carrier named Air Vista Express, which specialized in short-hop flights between major cities. Unlike the long-haul complexities of Nova Sky Connect or the mid-range routes of SkyQuest Aviation, Air Vista's operational model centered on frequent takeoffs and landings, quick turnarounds, and streamlined service offerings. The challenge: maintaining exceptional customer care under tight schedules. Evelyn arrived at Air Vista's compact terminal, a vibrant space plastered with posters advertising quick connections and scenic destinations. She noted the cheerful color scheme and energetic staff, a testament to Air Vista's brand identity as the friendly local airline. But friendly branding alone wasn't enough. Evelyn wanted assurance that real kindness thrived behind the slogans. Inside a small conference room, she met Brandon Lee, Air Vista's station manager, along with two supervisors who oversaw flight attendants. After initial pleasantries, the conversation turned to the airline's most pressing issue: balancing high-frequency schedules with meaningful passenger interactions. Brandon explained how each flight window was meticulously planned: 30 minutes to deplane, clean, reboard, and depart again. "That leaves very little time for personal touches," he admitted. "Some attendants fear they can't offer the same level of attention you expect at your other carriers." Evelyn offered an encouraging smile. "Efficiency and courtesy aren't mutually exclusive. We just have to be smart about how we train and allocate tasks. A small gesture, a quick greeting, a genuine smile, can make all the difference." Over the next few days, Evelyn hopped on several Air Vista flights incognito, staying alert to how attendants balanced speed with compassion. Many handled it admirably. They guided passengers to their seats with practiced ease, conducted safety checks swiftly yet politely, and offered quick refreshments with a smile. The short flight times meant minimal in-flight service, but that didn't prevent attendants from sharing a pleasant word or two. Still, she observed occasional cracks in the rush. On one flight, an elderly man struggled to place his cane in the overhead bin, while the lead attendant hustled to close compartments. Although the attendant eventually helped him, her tone was brusque, and she seemed more worried about on-time departure than the passenger's comfort. Evelyn understood the time crunch but believed there was always a better way to communicate empathy, even when pressed for minutes. After deplaning, Evelyn quietly compared notes with Brandon. "What I'm seeing is mostly good," she said. "But let's incorporate more situational training, brief modules that teach attendants how to handle passenger needs without derailing a tight schedule. Sometimes even acknowledging a delay, 'I'll be right back to assist you, sir,' can ease tension." Brandon took her feedback to heart, coordinating short refresher courses where attendants practiced real-life scenarios. They rehearsed everything from stowing mobility aids to diplomatically asking passengers to gate-check larger bags. The training emphasized swift but kind interactions, equipping attendants with phrases that conveyed empathy while keeping lines moving. Within weeks, positive feedback rolled in. Passengers who once felt rushed now remarked on the helpful, thoughtful staff. Attendants reported increased confidence, as they no longer felt torn between time pressures and courtesy. Tapping into her broader network's wisdom, Evelyn also arranged for Hazel Parker to host a virtual Q&A session with the AirVista crew, sharing tips and answering their questions about best practices gleaned from other airlines. From afar, Evelyn also kept an eye on broader developments. Brooke Simmons had vanished from the airline circuit, presumably unable or unwilling to align with the new service culture. Meanwhile, flight attendants like Hazel continued to rise, shaping a new generation of compassionate, efficient cabin crew. AirVista's transformation was swift, given its smaller size. Within a short span, the airline's satisfaction scores soared, matching or even surpassing larger carriers. Even the attendant who had once brusquely helped the elderly passenger was lauded for her newfound warmth. Evelyn, gratified, recognized how quickly a tight-knit operation could adapt when everyone pulled in the same direction. In a final meeting with Brandon, Evelyn praised the swift changes. "You've shown everyone that hustle and heart can coexist," she said. "I hope AirVista Express continues to prove that short flights can still be memorable for the right reasons." Brandon grinned. "We're honored to uphold your vision. Thank you for guiding us." As Evelyn stepped away from the bustling AirVista concourse, she felt a sense of pride tinged with humility. Each airline demanded its own approach, its own blend of solutions. Yet the underlying principle remained constant: authentic compassion for passengers resonated more than any flashy branding could. By focusing on simple human decency, by ensuring no request, no traveler, went ignored, AirVista and its sister airlines were coming closer to the ideal Evelyn had always envisioned. A bright morning sun illuminated the large, modern terminal of Jetstar Infinity, a newly formed subsidiary under Evelyn Lancaster's expansive aviation umbrella. Built on the foundations of a niche regional airline she'd acquired, Jetstar Infinity was poised to become a hybrid carrier, serving both domestic and select international destinations. Its sleek branding, punctuated by the tagline, "Where Journeys Begin," attracted curiosity from travelers and industry insiders alike. Evelyn arrived to oversee the final preparations before Jetstar Infinity's official launch. For months, she and her team had carefully planned the airline's operational framework and service philosophy. This time, they aimed to integrate the best lessons gleaned from prior reforms directly into Jetstar Infinity's DNA, leaving no room for complacency. The question on everyone's mind was, could they preempt the pitfalls that had plagued older carriers, or would new challenges inevitably arise? Inside a spacious briefing room, Evelyn joined a select group of pilots, flight attendants, and gate agents for a last-minute orientation. Captain Warner, now serving as a consultant for the new venture, stood near the front, reviewing the airline's safety protocols with methodical precision. Hazel Parker, hailed as a champion of passenger advocacy, had also been invited to train Jetstar's inaugural cabin crew. Her calm demeanor and friendly approach set an encouraging tone. From the moment the session began, the focus was clear: genuine service. Even the uniforms, made of comfortable, sustainable fabrics, reflected Evelyn's commitment to practicality paired with a welcoming aesthetic. Attendants were reminded that kindness and patience were the bedrocks of any flight. "We've worked out the best blueprint we can," Evelyn announced. "But real success depends on your everyday actions, your willingness to respect each traveler's dignity." As the official launch day arrived, Jetstar Infinity's first flights took to the skies. Evelyn and Hazel boarded an inaugural route to see how the crew performed under real conditions. The flight hummed with excitement. Passengers were greeted by smiling attendants, who promptly offered directions to the seat rows and assistance with luggage. During takeoff, Captain Warner's calm, informative announcements helped soothe first-time flyers, reinforcing the airline's transparent communication style. In-flight service proceeded with remarkable efficiency. The attendants provided water, snacks, and friendly banter, small touches that made even a short flight memorable. Hazel discreetly observed how the crew handled a passenger with dietary restrictions, swiftly arranging an alternate snack without fuss. Another passenger, traveling alone with an infant, received help folding a stroller before deplaning. Each interaction seemed to embody the principles Evelyn had long championed. For Evelyn, these early flights felt like a glimpse of what her entire network of airlines could be at their best. The synergy between thoughtful hiring, robust training, and practical policies shone through. Of course, challenges would arise eventually. The true test would come in the busy holiday seasons, weather disruptions, and the daily grind that tested even the most dedicated staff. But for now, Jetstar Infinity's debut was a resounding success, a testament to the lessons learned from the past. In a small celebration later that evening, Evelyn raised a glass with the crew. "You've proven that an airline's spirit isn't determined by its size or history," she said, her voice carrying pride. "It's shaped by the people who stand ready to serve." Today marks the beginning of Jetstar Infinity's story, and I have no doubt you'll write it with compassion and grace. Hazel smiled, recalling the many steps it took to reach this point. From witnessing Brooke Simmons's callous refusal of water to championing a renewed service culture across multiple carriers. "If we maintain this commitment," Hazel noted, "Jetstar Infinity could become a model of how modern airlines operate: swift, efficient, and above all, caring." Evelyn nodded, grateful to have such dedicated individuals by her side. While the path ahead would demand perseverance, she felt confident that every piece of knowledge gained from past hurdles had strengthened her resolve. Jetstar Infinity, born of ambition and guided by empathy, stood as the crowning achievement of her ongoing mission, to prove that airlines could thrive financially and ethically, so long as they never lost sight of the most crucial factor, the well-being of the people who flew with them. With that final toast, the circle of attendants, pilots, and managers cheered, sealing the promise of Jetstar Infinity's future. The airline would soon face the everyday realities of aviation: delays, challenging passengers, unpredictable weather, but with a foundation built on empathy and respect, Evelyn believed Jetstar Infinity was poised to rise above. And, in doing so, it would stand as living proof that the lessons learned from every chapter, every new policy, every retraining, every second chance, had led them all to this moment, a fresh horizon, defined by compassion in the skies. Sometimes, the most significant lessons in life come from simple acts of kindness and empathy. Evelyn Lancaster's experiences highlight that true character isn't revealed when we're surrounded by people we want to impress, it emerges in how we treat those we believe can offer us nothing in return. Being respectful, humble, and attentive to the needs of others often leads to the greatest rewards, even if we don't see them immediately. We never know who is quietly observing our behavior or how our actions might influence someone's future. A small gesture of warmth, such as offering a cup of water to someone in need, has the power to transform both the giver and the receiver. This perspective reminds us that genuine success isn't measured solely by titles or possessions, but by the depth of our compassion. In any profession or personal relationship, consistent courtesy can turn ordinary interactions into meaningful connections. Stressful situations arise, deadlines, schedules, or competing priorities, yet staying calm and showing understanding can diffuse tension more effectively than any strict set of rules. As Evelyn discovered, leadership is not about exercising authority from a distance, it's about actively listening, recognizing good deeds, and offering second chances when sincere effort is made to improve. Applying these principles can enrich our own lives beyond the workplace, too. By valuing each person we meet, regardless of their status, we create an environment of mutual respect and positive energy. Small acts of kindness, done consistently, build trust and camaraderie. This approach nurtures stronger families, friendships, and communities, reminding us that empathy bridges gaps where judgment might otherwise prevail. If you find these insights meaningful, please support this channel by liking, subscribing, and ringing the notification bell. Your engagement helps share these life lessons with more people, further spreading the values of kindness, humility, and genuine care for one another. Thank you for being part of this journey.